Athlete Builder getting back at it. We got my guy Lucas, teammate extraordinaire, going over. We're in year 2 working together on our show. And we got Michael Buck Baccellieri. Baccellieri. That's why we're calling him Buck. So, fun intro in that Pat Ivy, who was just on, said, "Hey, mate, get my guy Buck on the show." So I don't even know anything about him. I called him up, a couple weeks later. Fast forward, here we are. I'm going to have him do what he just did before we started recording. He's going to take his camera and walk around. He's in the shipping container, apparently. That's his office. And if you listen closely, you can hear the chickens in the background because, he's an outdoorsman kind of guy, kind of like Haynes kind of dude. And so before I even talk about what you did going forward, just take that camera again, Buck, and just let everyone know that's watching it on YouTube, like, what is going on there since you're not on location with us, man. This is a first-timer for us, so let's hear about it.
The problem is if I unplug it, it's going to black out the screen. If I do that again, it'll black out the screen. So
all right. So
anyway,
just tell us what it is.
I walled off the last 12 feet of my container, and I threw the guns up there as props. But I don't typically keep anything worth a darn out here. But I do run my business out of this. I've insulated this last part. You can see in the corner. Right about there. There's I spray foam insulated it, studded out the container, and you can see which that side of me. My brother has a big giant sawmill cut out, 12-foot long, half-inch thick planks for me, and I've walled 2 of the sides, and then the other sides are Gallotex. So when I'm prepping for either training or work or whatever, I can hang whatever I need, get it all organized, and then get squared away and pick and pull from there. So,
but also within the container, you got your own squat rack because you got squatting.
That's right. That's right. At the far end of the container, the last 8 feet of the container is a sore neck squat rack and one of the recon benches and a bunch of kettlebells and center mass bells and.
Perfect.
Yeah, best way to warm up in the winter inside of a shipping container is by swinging a bunch of kettlebells.
Nothing wrong with that. The best program is one that you stick to.
That's right.
So Buck, halfway into high school, joins the military. And but instead of me butchering that story, just talk about the first few years of high school, and then right after that, and what happened for you career-wise.
Yeah, so I was a terrible student, like the worst. Like I failed every class my freshman year, I think, to include PE. I just was I hated being there, and if you ask my mother, she'll tell you I was 6. I remember being about 8 or 9, telling her I wanted to be in the military, and so I joined when I was 17. I signed the documents 32 days after my 17th birthday, and then I was so anxious to go, I didn't wait to go active. I joined the National Guard. So I joined the Army National Guard, and I was on what's called the split option program. Anybody in the Guard will know about it. To where I went to boot camp between my junior and senior year. And then came back, did the weekend warrior deal as an infantryman, a straight leg infantryman, my senior year in high school. And then the day after graduation, which I didn't graduate, I left for infantry school. And the only reason I have a high school diploma is because when you're in the Guard, going to boot camp and infantry school, you get high school credit. So my recruiter came back to high school after I came back and said, he's done this amount of military training, you will now give him a diploma. So that's the only reason I actually have a high school diploma.
Dang.
It was bad. My brother and I had our own apartment our senior year, and it wasn't like, hey, do you want to skip school? It was like, hey, we should go to school, man. We haven't been there in a really, really long time. And we were never like drinkers or partiers. We were out breaking axles and rabbit hunting and camping and hiking and doing everything that we could to break our pickup trucks and jump them. And we were just 2 freaking boys wanting to play hard. And so, anyway, somehow he graduated from his high school as student body president. I have no idea how he duped him into letting that happen. Yeah, it's pretty funny. And then, anyway, so yeah, I went to basic training for the Army at Fort Benning between my junior and senior year of high school, did the weekend warrior thing the day after I graduated, or walked, if you will. Went to infantry school, came back, and then shortly after that, I graduated in 99, 2000, went on my first deployment, volunteered for deployment over to Saudi, came back, spent 6 months there, came back, and I was working, anybody from the Pacific Northwest will know the company. I was working as a tire guy at Les Schwab Tires, really prominent tire company out here. Anyway, wanted to go back active, didn't want to really go into the Army as I'd had a taste of that. I didn't really know much about special operations, knew that I really wanted to pursue a sniper program. So I filled out what's called a 368 form. In layman's terms, it's a cross-decking form. So I filled that out, got it signed by the command. And then what that does is that releases you from one branch of the military, but you have to be in another branch of the military in 72 hours. Otherwise, I think you can actually be put on the deserter list, not just AWOL. But 48 hours later, I was in the Marine Corps, and I was standing on the yellow footprints at MCRD San Diego, going through boot camp again. And then went through boot camp in the Marine Corps, did that January of 01, and then stayed in the Marine Corps for 4 years, got out in 05, and then had a break in service for about 5 years. During that time, I got a degree, of all things, believe it or not, diesel technology, and I was working, I worked for Caterpillar for 2 years building engines, and then I switched over to Cummins. I was working at the Cummins Northwest, the Pacific Northwest Cummins factory, and building engines there. And then in 2010, went back into the military, into the National Guard. Again, my time in the Marine Corps, I spent the first 2 years as, I guess you would call it amphibious infantryman now. We were in a boat company. Back then, they called us the Raiders before MARSOC actually ended up taking that name on. So if I say I was a Raider now, somebody's going to call me out on stolen valor, but a Raider from 0203 time frame, you were a boat company Marine. So anyway, I spent my first 2 years as a boat company Marine, and then took the sniper platoon indoc and spent the next 2 years of my career in a scout sniper platoon. Did my last deployment in a stay platoon. The problem is the op tempo of our deployments at that time. I didn't get the opportunity to go to sniper school. So, I mean, I did the job on my last deployment, carry a sniper rifle on the deployment, but I refused to call myself a sniper because I hadn't gone to the school and I didn't have the MOS for it. So it just felt dishonoring to claim that, but it really ate at me, and which kind of lends to the identity piece that we're going to kind of dive into a little bit later. But I went back in to the National Guard because at that point I was married with a kid, and my family had no idea what active duty life was, and I didn't really want to bring them into that. It's a rough go. So I went on the reserve side again, well, the National Guard side, simply to get sniper school because I'd done the job and I wanted to be able to put it on a resume. So I went back into the National Guard, kind of elbowed my way into a sniper section, went through sniper school, and then got a phone call a year later I was asked to come back and finish my career teaching sniper school down at Fort Chaffee at the National Guard Sniper School. So I ended up spending another 4 years in completing sniper school, and then going back down and finishing out the last 6 months of my career teaching sniper school.
What year is it when all this ended then?
2014. I got out in February 2014. So 2013, I was teaching sniper school.
Gotcha. And my military knowledge is unbelievably limited. So I got to imagine each branch has its own sniper program, right?
To a point, yes. A lot of times, so the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School is kind of the foundation, the staple. And now that they've disbanded that, it'll be different. But essentially, on the conventional side of the military, when I say conventional side, I mean basic infantry, not special operations, not special forces, Rangers, whatever, SEALs, blah, blah, blah. You have what's called a basic course. And in the Marine Corps, it's called SSBC, Scout Sniper Basic Course. And in the Army, it was called the Bravo 4 course. So in the Marine Corps, we had a guy that was a cook that indocked into our platoon. And then when he went through sniper school, he got a new primary MOS, or military occupational specialty, of 8541. That was his new primary MOS, or primary job in the military, even though he started and spent like 3 years or whatever it was as a cook. So in the Marine Corps, you can come from any different job, take an indoc, and then go become a sniper. In the Army, you have to either be an infantryman or a scout, like a reconnaissance scout, to go to the sniper school. So therefore, you don't get another MOS, you get what's called a ASI, alternate skills identifiers. I think what that means. It's been a long time. Anyway, so in the Marine Corps, I was an 0311. That's an infantryman. In the Army, I was an 11 Bravo, which is also an infantryman. But in the Marine Corps, if I'd have gone to that school, my primary MOS, instead of being 0311, would have been overridden by 8541. In the Army, since I was an 11 Bravo, there's just an additional identifier. So I then became an 11 Bravo 4. So a Bravo 4 is an Army sniper. And now in 0317, it changed in 05 or 06, I think, from 8541 to 0317. This is getting really, really nuanced about the whole program. But either way, that's your baseline infantryman stuff. And then sniper program stuff. And then on the special operations side, you have a program called SIFSIC, and you have SIFSIC level 2 and then SIFSIC level 1. And now that is Special Forces Sniper course, and I'm going to probably screw up the numbers, so if somebody's a SIFSIC grad out there, please don't beat me up. But what that does is that allows you, once you've graduated SIFSIC, to take a shot, I think at 400 meters within 2 meters of a friendly person, right? So if you have personnel at 400 meters, if you're a SIFSIC level 1 grad, you're now authorized to take that shot within 2 meters of friendly personnel. I think is really one of the big differentiators. But their school's a little bit more involved as far as understanding the math and the application of the art.
That's a lot more than just a yes or no answer.
I apologize.
Not at all. It's all right. So what I noticed here, you said you weren't really, well, you even said, hey, I wasn't really into school, wasn't really into playing sports, like being outside. Like working on things like being outdoorsy, which you still need to be athletic to do that. But if you're not playing much sports and you go to boot camp, there's a physicality component, obviously, right? There's obstacle courses, there's the push-ups, the Marines have the pull-ups, the running, etc. How'd you fare? How did you do? Were you fine with that, or were you in shape enough to be able to perform?
It was not hard. The hardest thing that I would say for me, I've never been a runner. I don't like running. I ran a 14 and a half miles, so it was over a half marathon about 6 months ago. And it was funny because my buddy he turned 50 this last year. And I said, what are you going to do for your half century year? And he's like, I'm running a half marathon. I'm getting back into it. And then he looks at me and he's like, you want to do it with me? And I look at my wife, and my wife and him look at each other, and they both look at me and they're like, you going to bitch out of this one? And I'm like, doggone it. So like my wife and him had kind of like chided me or whatever. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it with you. No problem. Well, I call this guy who's a former retired super ninja in the military, but he's in his 50s and he still runs ultra marathons. He still runs an Ironman every other year or something. He and his wife, they're just animals. They're just absolute machines. And I called him and I was like, dude, I just signed up for a half marathon. He was like, man, that's awesome. And I was like, well, not really. How do I do this while I'm old? And he was like, all right, I'm going to put you on a program. So he's like, you need to buy these shoes. You need to get this book, right? And he's like, stick to the program. And I was like, okay. Well, I'm on the road like 7 months a year. So like being in different time zones constantly, like, I mean, I'm on a plane 15 times a month, and you're just constantly exhausted. So I bet I trained for that half marathon like maybe I ran 6 times and never more than 3 miles. And like the longest I ran, I think was like 3.1 or something.
That's bad.
Yeah. And so my wife, we go to this gym. She works with this trainer, and he kind of works with both of us, but I hadn't started my program yet. And he texts me and he's like, hey, when's your half marathon? I was like, it's tomorrow. And he's like, you ready? And I'm like, no. And he's like, you just going to send it? And I'm like, 100%. And so like, I just went out and did it. And I think I made it like 9.5 miles before I started walking. So I made it like I've made it farther than I thought I was going to. Yeah. And then I probably ran 11.5 out of the 14.5 miles. And, so like I can pick a pace like a 9 or a 10-minute mile, and I can go that way forever. If you need me to run 6-minute miles, you're talking to the wrong dude. So when I was in the military, as long as we weren't like sprinting, like doing just a mock Jesus pace, like I was fine and I could keep up. I hated every minute of it. I didn't enjoy it at all. But when it came to being in the water, I was really, really strong in the water because I grew up, well, my dad builds boats. And I mean, I spent more time on the water than I did on land growing up half the time. And I learned how to swim against a current. So I'm like incredibly strong in the water. And
Is there a trick to that?
I think just being dumb. I don't know. Like,
No, swimming against the current. Is there just being dumb is all I need to be?
so much of swimming is about form. It's about learn how to cut and be efficient in the water, right?
Right.
And I don't know how I developed it. I just did, but I grew up, wakeboarding and snowboarding and skiing and water skiing and just slamming into the current and then having to get my way back to the boat. And I don't know. I just guess I clawed my way through it. And then, it's
So
also
no
really
help.
hard to injure yourself when you're swimming. You know what I mean? Like you can
Yeah.
injure yourself running. The only time you're going to injure yourself swimming is if you get caught in a riptide going out in the ocean and you're fighting against the tide to get home. You can
Hmm.
pull something then. But I mean, anyway, so yeah, I was good in the water and I was good on obstacle courses and I could do pull-ups. I could do a million push-ups. I was strong. I just wasn't a runner. So that was the only part of it that was really ever a challenge for me.
Gotcha. Now, from halfway through or a good chunk of the way through your military career, you're gravitating towards the sniper program. And, you know, where you work now, Loophole and Stevens, they make scopes, so you can see the guns behind you. Obviously, you developed this affinity towards that. How was that calling you?
I think that I was never really attracted to like the belt-fed machine gun or the assaulter life where you're kicking in. I mean, I don't get me wrong that CQB is a really really there's a big sex appeal to it, right? The kicking in, button hooking, cross hooking doors, like you know what I mean, hitting your corners and like there's that rapid that adrenalized pump that comes into that. And it'd be like the difference between to me of like you going and saying, hey, I'm going to do a really methodical warm up and then I'm going to one rep max for the day
Yep.
versus going in and setting up like four stations with your buddies and like freaking slapping each other 10 times and then turn on Pantera and like, all right, dude, we're doing 6 rotations as fast as we can, as hard as we can. Right. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of that different mindset. And
Right.
as much as that stuff's fun in training, I don't care what anybody will tell you. Doing CQB in real life is one of the scariest things you could ever possibly imagine because you don't know what's waiting on the other side of that door, and that adrenaline rush was the only part of that was really attractive to me. But I have this weird kind of closet side of my brain that's a total engineering math dork, and thinking about calculating for atmospherics, thinking about the bullet trajectory, thinking about 3 different phases of flight and what the drag is on that bullet and how it changes throughout that, and starting to methodically calculate what it's like to be able to put something down on the other end of that bullet at 1,000 yards, 1,200 yards, whatever. Growing up hunting, like many boys growing up, like one of my main documentaries I used to watch was Jeremiah Johnson as a training video, right? And like I just wanted to be that mountain man that was just harvesting my own game. So there's a couple things that came into that. One is I'm a total hippie when it comes to hunting. I'm an avid hunter. When I did that spin, you probably saw some of my heads mounted on the wall here. Um,
Those are animal heads, not people heads, by the way.
yes, but if I thank you for
To
clarifying.
clarify, yes.
Um, I'm not a big trophy hunter. In fact, those two are the only mounts that I have actually because I'm just sort of a meat hunter and I'm super adamantly against animals suffering in any way. Like even if you're prairie dog hunting, even if you're coyote hunting, like you do it ethically, you do it well, and you honor that animal, right? And so that one shot, that well placed bullet was very, very attractive to me. And I probably watched Tom Berenger movie too many times too growing up, but there was something attractive to me about a man, his bolt action rifle being extremely capable. And then something that a lot of people don't realize too about the sniper side of combat is the force multiplication the sniper community brings. Not just on a capabilities standpoint, and I can dive more into that in a second, but more on the psychological aspect of it. Because if there's no sound, or there's a distant shot, but you have no idea where it came from, and then all of a sudden your leader drops, right? There's an entire platoon now that is without leadership and has no idea what to do, and they're scared to death. And you can, with a single well-placed bullet, change the entire trajectory of the battlefield, psychologically and physically, because if you're able to take out leadership or a radio operator, that's 2 bullets, that's 2 kills. You're not, one, just maiming an entire freaking group of people, but I can't remember who said it, but somebody said in a gunfight, you don't have to make your enemy incapable of finishing the fight. You just have to make them unwilling to finish the fight. And nobody in the history of warfare is more capable of that or brings that to the table like a sniper does. And there was something really neat about that to me. And I know we've gotten a bad rap throughout the years of being lone assassins and all this BS, but there was something really neat about knowing my weapon system, going out and being able to do all the calculations and, being invisible. Just the whole art and craft of it was just really remarkable to me. So it's been an attraction since I was young.
All battles are won before they're ever fought, right?
I suppose, yeah.
So the number of ways that just played out in your example, you take out the leader or the radio guy, and the battle doesn't even occur.
Right.
And so if you can't run, you can't finish boot camp. So if you don't prepare, you can't even get in the battle. And then when someone's so intimidated, right, they don't want to come out of that corner in the ring anymore. Sonny Liston didn't want to come back out anymore.
Yeah.
You got hit so many times that, hey, I'm done, right? You just give up. So you take that out. And then when Pat Ivy said, hey, I should get a hold of you, and you told me what you're all about, I'm like, man, this isn't athletics at all. But, we talk about mindset as an athlete. And then there's the mindset, you have your job. Then there's still the knowledge of your sport. Bill Belichick was bitching one day because Edelman was wearing red gloves. And they're like, what's the big deal? They're just gloves. They match our uniforms. What's the big deal? And for those who know, Bill Belichick, football coach, Edelman was on the field. Anyways, when you're wearing red gloves and the other team is wearing white, then you can see that your hands are on the other team. If you're wearing white gloves, it blends in. If you're wearing white gloves, you're less likely to be called for holding. Small little nuance, right? Not a big deal. Not really pertinent in this conversation, except the fact that you listed probably only 10 of 200 things that go into all the preparation for one shot. So there's the knowledge of your sport. If you want to be elite, you got to know about the difference between red and white gloves. If you want to be elite in the sniper community or in the special forces or anything like that, you're talking lives at that level. So anytime we're talking lives, it's more elite than sports. And you got to know all those things too. So there's a knowledge of your sport. Then there's what comes out of your mouth. There's teammates. How do you talk? How do you work with teammates? Now the thing with snipers, forgive me if I'm wrong because I don't know much about military, but isn't there a spotter that you're working with? Don't you have someone who's helping you? Like you're never usually by yourself totally. So now
typically not. We typically work in a 4-man team.
Okay.
Especially because if you get into a hide site and you're there for 36, 48 hours, you can't be staring through a scope awake and alert that whole time. So you gotta, your priorities at work, so we call it in a hide site, you gotta set up security. You've gotta be able to get guys to have downtime and rest and get their eyes off glass or whatever it is. And there's a lot of aspects of sniping that I brought up before that are more like the romanticized version of what sniping is. If you want to be really honest to the nitty gritty of what a sniper does, is about 97% of the time we sit there and we watch people and we log it down, right? We're a reconnaissance asset at the battalion level. And 95+% of our job is incredibly boring and it's slow. The field craft of it, all of the sniper school skill sets that you're tested on, that's all the attractive stuff that we're all romantically sucked into it by. Just like being in the military, everybody was like, man, I want to be in the army and blow shit up. And then later you got the same guy who's like, yep, stand by to stand by, hurry up and wait. You know what I mean? It's like there's
Right.
so much there that a small percentage you get to do that really neat stuff. And my last military deployment, we got to do a lot of that stuff, and it was really remarkable. And it was an amazing indicator of the force multiplier that I'm talking about being in the sniper program, because in 2004 in Fallujah, we had 2 battalions there, if I remember right. It was just 2 battalions. And I remember the bad guys came on, and they didn't say, if you remove your 2,000 Marines, we'll stop fighting. They said, if you remove your snipers from this city, we'll stop fighting. That they basically came on and said, of 2,000 to 2,500 men, if you remove these 36 men, we will quit. And the work that we did was so valuable as far as keeping Marines safe. It was remarkable. It was really neat. And that aspect of the job was really cool. But like I said, that was a different city. That was a different time period of the war. And it was different, in many ways, whereas there was so much sitting around and so much waiting, or so many IEDs and dealing with all that BS. This was a little bit more of an interesting pump. But, to get that response from your enemy was a pretty affirming piece of information. Like there's 2,500 Neanderthals ready to freaking, you know what I mean, do some dirty work. And they didn't say remove your 2,500 Norsemen.
Yeah,
They said,
right.
remove 36 of these men and we'll quit. And, of course we didn't, but, anyway, yeah, and it was quite a compliment when you think about it on a deployment, and I got to be one of those 36 men, and it was really, really remarkable.
Yeah. The whenever there's conflict, right? Conflict handled well improves relationships. Conflict handled poorly hurts them. And whether you're on a team, basketball team, baseball team, whatever, there's conflict, right? You and the coach, you versus the staff, the GAs, whatever. And if you're not handling it well, the team deteriorates. And if you're in a 4-person unit, same deal. Even if you're doing things well, there's still a bunch of conflict, physical conflict. People are getting shot and killed, where people are forever altered. And if you listen to 2 episodes ago when we had Tim Brown on, he talks at length about that from the 9/11. Talk about the steps that people take to get their mindset right, the things they do physically, the things they do when they come back from deployments, because you can't just go around knocking people down when you're at Walmart, right? And then you get to reintegrate with family members, et cetera. And some people are challenged mentally, obviously. So can you talk about that a little bit? And then we want to get definitely into your order of 3, because that's going to be probably the crux of this episode and one of the reasons we wanted to have you on. So 2-part
Yeah, and I
question there,
think
Buck.
the question that you just asked will segue into that anyway, whether we want it to or not.
Sure.
Most people don't really do that well.
Right.
They don't mentally and emotionally prepare well,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't mentally and emotionally demob well. And there's a movie I like to quote. I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. It's a Mel Gibson movie called The Edge of Darkness, where he's a Boston cop, and his daughter gets poisoned in the movie. And so the whole movie he's chasing down, trying to figure out, who did this and get to the bottom of it. But anyway, he walks in. I can't remember if it's the governor's office or the mayor's office or whoever it was. And he was a Marine in Vietnam, and then he came back to Boston, became a cop. And whoever it was, he's in his home, and he says, "So what was it like after Vietnam, coming home, coming back to Boston?" And I'm going to screw up the line. I haven't seen the movie in 15 years. But he goes, "Oh, it was fine." He said, "Yeah, it's no big deal. I figure you come out of war the same way you go into it." And the first time I heard him say that, I was like, that is the most ignorant statement I've ever heard in my life. And then within a couple of months coming back from my last deployment, I ended up going into a counseling office. That's a whole nother backstory that I'm not going to get into, but I ended up going to this counseling office and meeting with this counselor. And after a 2-hour session, I was like, I am really screwed up. And so that was in, I want to say early '05. and I haven't stopped going to counseling since, if that'll tell you the impact it had on my life. Um, but what I found is when you go 3 to 4 layers deep into the world of psychology, his statement was incredibly profound. And what I mean by that was the level of security that we have to face trauma, to face obstacles, to face adversity is going to dictate how well you come out of that, right? It doesn't mean there's not going to be 19 more layers that you're still going to have to work through, but your level of ability to face into that and your sense of security of who you are going into that is going to dictate very much how you exit that, right? And so on a whole nother level of understanding, years later, I remembered that quote and I thought that is an incredibly important quote. Um, you guys still hear me?
Go ahead,
You get cut
timestamp that.
off. You there?
Yeah, you cut out. There's a big humming noise.
When what was the last thing you heard?
You said that Mel Gibson's statement was actually profound, and then
Yeah.
you said once you go 19 levels deep, you said on a whole different level, and that's where it stopped.
Yeah, and so once you go a lot deeper, you realize that that level of security that you have, that sense of security and that knowledge of who you are going into trauma or going into obstacles is going to define how you come out of that. And like I said, it doesn't matter if you've got a whole lot more layers deep, but if I go into a really traumatic situation knowing that when I meet trauma or when I meet traumatic situations, these are the tools that I need to tap into. These are the places that I'm going to be hurt and wounded. And these are the ways that I need to approach that so that I can make myself whole again or tap into resources that I know are out of my immediate control or my capability and say, hey, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. Here's where I need to reach for growth and for understanding and for help in that area. If I go into a traumatic situation with a level of knowledge saying, this could get really hard and it's going to hurt. And I need to be okay with being hurt. And then I need to be okay with growth out of that. I'm going to come out going, yep, I'm super hurt and I need to figure out how to get healthy here. But if I go in there as a very insecure, ignorant young man and say, I can handle this, I got this, right? But then we go to that whole veteran thing of like, I'm going to bury it, dive in a bottle, I got this, all the bullshit, what do you call them? Stereotypes that come with, combat trauma or whatever. It's interesting to see how men who appear like, I don't know if you would, weak or if you will, because they're willing to be vulnerable. They're willing to say, this is hard. I'm having a really hard day right now and I need to talk through this with somebody. How much healthier those men come out of combat because they're also willing to come out of combat and go, that was really hard. And I'm not sure how to handle that, but I'm not sleeping well. And I need to go seek some help and growth in areas that can help me work through this. Whereas other dudes are like, I'm fine. I'm going to fucking eat children. I'm good. I'm going to go burn the world. And they get in there and then they leave. And those are the guys that are diving into a bottle or starting a handgun. Right. So you guys, anyway, we can keep going until these things reconnect here. But so I guess what I mean by that is that you come out of war the same way you go into it in regards to your sense of security and understanding and knowing yourself and being able to go into that, heading into that situation in a healthy manner so that you can exit in a healthy manner. And you do the craziest sport in the world doesn't mean you're not going to break your leg, right? But being able to rehab from that and grow from that is going to dictate how healthy you are and if you're able to continue pursuing that sport. You know what I mean? And so that's why so many veterans over time, I think, are beat down and at the end of it they end up we've got the Project 22 and all these guys that are committing suicide or whatever it is. They're not, as they go through those different experiences, they're not saying, okay, this is another one and I'm not going to let it compound. I'm going to pursue growth through this one. And then they get through it and then on to the next and blah, 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 if that makes sense.
Whoa, abandonment. And I got kids that are, they'll be afraid of talking to their coach and how they, advocate for themselves. afraid to say I don't know how to do something, afraid to look stupid. They're afraid of to be actually working harder in the gym. They're actually called a try hard because the other friends aren't doing it. So they're trying to bring them down. And because if you're different, then you stand out, and then nobody wants to be different, at least at a younger age. Because then they don't like you, and then you're by yourself. And if you come back from deployment and you say I'm weak here, or if you're any man, whether it's deployment or not, I'm weak here. You're worried about people thinking you're a big pussy, and you're not respected, and then you'll have no friends, and you'll be by yourself, and you'll be gone, right? So I can't, I can't handle this. So to your point, once you're cool with who you are, you can sit there and say, man, I'm terrible at this, and but I'm working on it, and then you just do that, and then people see, oh, that person was confident enough to simply say I was terrible at that. So if those people that are authentic, I see nothing but strength there, confidence there, because they're just being real. And the cops are at the gym that are loud and I can do this and this and that, I'm like, okay. Because there's also a couple older cops that are at the gym that are former Rangers that are always just kind of quiet, and they're joking around and having a good time. But I'm like, so tell me about this other guy. He goes, yeah, well, I taught him hand to hand and I taught him weapons, so everything he knows, I already, they're so confident they don't have to put on that layer, right? Because
Yeah.
they're just so secure themselves, and that
Yeah. It's
only
that old
comes
adage
from
that confidence is quiet and insecurity is loud.
right. But confidence only comes from reps. So that's the real shitty thing. So when you go through trauma as a kid or whatever, or you're getting kicked around in high school, but then you're figuring shit out. Once you go through that and you figure out, hey, I can be okay, then you have the confidence to then at least try. And then if
You
you have the
know,
confidence to ask for help and find a teammate, whether it's a counselor or a coach, well, I know I'll be okay. And with this tool or this other person, I'll be okay faster. And it's those two
yeah,
pieces together that really, you know what, I'll be fine. And then for some, it's like, well, no matter what happens, I got Jesus, or I got my wife, or I got my
right.
kid. So you don't really care. Oh, the person doesn't like me, whatever. But you at least have the confidence once you go through something hard to at least try something hard again. And those that avoid it, the same thing happens. I'm reinforcing being afraid and cowering. So the next time something that's fearful that shows up, I'm going to cower again. So if I'm afraid to have a conversation with my wife because I know how it's going to go, well, the next time I'm mad at her, I don't have the conversation because the last time when I was faced with the same situation, the action I took was hide or bury it. So you do it again and you do it again. So now your default process is burying it, which just ruins things, right? Because you didn't handle it. But if your process is just handling it, going through all the lumps and growing through it and asking yourself, why is this happening for me, not to me, then you at least got a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would, I might disagree with you a little bit on that confidence comes through reps. And the reason why I would disagree with that is I deep dived into psychology when I realized how screwed up I was, and then learning a lot about how our brain processes, our brain works, the story that we tell ourselves, and blah, blah, blah. And then I ended up marrying a therapist. She wasn't a therapist when we got married, but that was what her initial pursuit was. And then she had stopped going to school and then finished out her undergrad and her master's while we were married. And so this is like our nightly conversations around the dinner table, especially since we're empty nesters now. Our daughter is away at college. Kids are interesting, and in my opinion, they're the exact opposite of everything else on the planet. And what I mean by that is that if you want steel to be hard, you work hard in it. Watch a freaking blacksmith and the way he folds steel to make the strongest knife possible, right? He beats the dog shit out of that steel. If you want your muscles to grow and be strong, you wreck them, you tear them. That's what you do. By design, you tear them so that they heal back stronger. Kids are the exact opposite. And um, from that 0 to age 5 is where we really start to develop our sense of security. And, you know, I had a challenging father. I had a father that told me that I was probably never going to be good enough, and I sucked at everything I did and get better. I mean, I was scared of my dad. I'd hear his diesel engine growing up, and I would just get scared. I'd run around the house, clean up my shoes, make sure that nothing was around, so that I didn't get it when he got home, right? And then I look at all these guys that made it so much further than me in the military, and there was one common theme. And I'm not saying there weren't exceptions, but there was one common theme. They had a really remarkable relationship with their dads. They were very close with their dads. And their dads would allow them to fail and not say, you suck when they failed. They said, man, that sucks. Let's figure out how to do this differently. They were allowed to fail. And this is kind of segueing into what we're talking about, identity, purpose, and calling, the order of three. And then there was something I wrote on that paper that you'd asked about. And it was like, what, some about the growth of my training or mindset. And I said, I don't remember how I wrote it, but it was something versus value statements. Do you remember what I wrote there?
Information versus value statements.
Information versus value statements. And this is something I do with a lot of guys when I'm training long range. I was just down. The first time I did this was like a couple of years ago. We walked down, and there's a guy who's a former Marine. He's now a police sniper. I was putting these 6 cops through a sniper course, a 4-day or a 3-day precision rifle course. And we walked down, and this guy's shot group is like that big at 100 yards. Well, if that might be good if you're like into shotguns or something, but like for a sniper, that shot group should be that big at 100 yards, right? And he was so angry, and I walked up and I pointed his target and I said, what is that target telling you? And he's like, well, it tells me that I fucking suck. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, I mean, I obviously freaking something I'm doing's wrong. I obviously need to freaking tighten up my shot group. I suck somewhere. And I was like, that's not what I see from that target at all. And he said, well, what do you see? And I said, I just see information. That's all I see. That target, that inanimate object, doesn't get to be a value statement to you as a man, as a sniper, but that is good information to have. It doesn't mean it's fun information because it was a great shot group. It was a terrible shot group, but it's good information. And I take that information and I go, something's wrong. Either I'm getting a baffle strike in my suppressor, the throat's shot out in my rifle, something's touching the barrel, right? The harmonics aren't jiving very well in the build of the gun itself. Or maybe my fundamentals of marksmanship are waning and my natural point of aim needs to change, or my ability to stabilize through artificial supports needs to improve. Whatever it is, something is wrong, but that target with a large shot group, it's great information to have because it allows me to start troubleshooting this process. And when I look at young boys and watching their dads and the way that they interact with them, a kid screws up and knocks a freaking glass of OJ off the counter and spills OJ all over the carpet. Okay, that's great information. Now we know that when you move your arm this way and you come across that counter, you're going to knock the glass over. Also, this doesn't mean you're a piece of shit. I might have had to tell you this 3 times. Also, the processing capability of a kid at that age is not going to retain that information. I need to know that as a dad and have some patience and grace with that kid. But I can also look at you and say, that happened last time, buddy. What do you think we did the same time over again that caused that? Well, my arm. Okay, well, let's maybe next time, let's figure out a different way to try to reach for the glass. But it's really good information to have. It doesn't get to become a value statement. All your mistakes in life, those don't get to be value statements on you. Those are just really good pieces of information to have. I don't know how many times I've like started to pull up on a deadlift and my back is like, I'm like, nope, good information. It's too much weight, right? Pushed it too hard this time. It's good information. Did I screw up? No, I tried something new, or I tried more weight and or I tried a sumo deadlift versus whatever. And I'm like, nope, I'm doing it wrong. And good information to have, right? That's all it has to be. And so when we look at identity, when we look at our purpose, when we look at all this stuff, we allow our successes in whatever lane we're in to become value statements. And that's bullshit. But as a boy, if you're leaned into in a way that your dad says, dude, you're always enough for me. I don't care that you made 353 mistakes today. You are everything I ever dreamed of and hoped for. That kid is going to grow up and he's going to go, I'm going to try it. You think you're going to make it? I have no idea. I might fall on my ass failing, but you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. Why? Because my dad freaking told me that I'm good enough to try anything. And guess what? If I screw that up, I'm still an amazing young man. That's the way I was raised. And you know what? I didn't do well at that. No big deal. And moved on. And there was this story that was really life-changing. It was an article written by a woman whose son was a high school football player. And and it was about how well her husband was a mentor to her kids. And you're gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's hilarious that you have me on a podcast called Athlete Builder, and I don't know sports ball worth a shit, and I'm probably gonna get the positions wrong and what the game was and everything wrong because I don't play freaking sports ball at all. So it was the last game of the season that was gonna allow them to go to the next level, or they were out for the season, whatever game that's called in high school. I have no idea. Anyway, kid was a wide receiver. It was like down to the wire. And this is a true story. It's not like some Hollywood BS deal. She was writing this article, and it was an amazing article. But the quarterback chucks this football in a long shot, and he's down near the end zone, and the ball just went right through his hands. And they lost the game like that. And she turned to her husband to basically say, oh, no. And he was gone. And she looked up, and he was double palming the fence, sprinting towards his son as fast as he could. And he got down to his kid and grabbed him by the face mask and like smashes him forehead to forehead with his helmet in his forehead. And he was like, do not let this define you. You are everything I've ever dreamed of in a son. You are everything I've ever hoped for in a young man. You are amazing. And this doesn't get to define you. And his whole purpose, the way I was reading that article, I thought it was going to go an entirely different direction. And his whole purpose was to get into his son's head and speak truth before the negativity from the coach or his peers came into play. And I think the reality is if we had fathers who just weren't dads, they were mentors, mentoring young men to be resilient against the negativity and the bullshit of this world. Now, I understand I'm speaking in pipe dreams and freaking whatever, but there are men out there like this. I was not one of them when my daughter was young, and I have regrets for it. But I believe that at that young age, you can instill that sense of security in someone to the first time they meet an obstacle, not the second or the third or the fourth. The first time they go, I'm going to try. And when they fail, they go, that's okay. I know I'm enough. That's okay. You know, I think that you and I had to learn that sense of security through repetition because we were already broken by men who didn't know how to mentor us. If that makes sense.
No, it does. You learn a lot what not to do and a lot of what to do from any leader in your life, right? Parent, coach, whatever. And all parents, me included, make tons of mistakes, and we have some great wins as well. So, I know that you imparted pain on my own kids for mistakes, and then things that have been helpful and awesome for them as well. So you can grow through that and just grit your way through, which is not fun. And I've done that a lot of ways, and a lot of ways I've had plenty of help and guidance. Reason, you said it's funny about you're on the Athlete Builder show and you're not in athletics. I published a book recently, and one of the things in there I reference is Ray Dalio. Nothing about athletics. He created Bridgewater, the largest investment firm ever, out of his garage. Wow. Out of his garage, right? And his logo on his book, Principles, is this little rising constant circle. So it's like it's going up, and this going up, and we come back and up and come back, up and come back. And what he wants, what he's desperate for in his company is constant feedback loop. He wants to encourage everyone to just get out there and try in their department, whatever ideas they have. Hey, this is not going well. This is sucking ass. Great. Perfect. Adjust. Yeah. We want the mistakes fast. We don't want no mistakes. We want mistakes fast so we can adjust. It's the whole 1,000 light bulbs, right, for Edison, right?
Yeah.
Took over 1,000 different tries. I'm just picking up another nuances on how it doesn't work. So that component, but you're right. You don't do that because you get slapped 3 or 4 times. You're like, fuck, man, I'm not trying anymore.
Yeah.
Right. You're not. But if you have that thing, well, you know what? I'll just keep trying. I'll try a different route. I'll just keep trying. And if you have that ingrained in you, then you hunt for it because you're comfortable with all the losses because that's what you understand that it's required so you can adjust. Right. So torn discs in my back and broke my foot training. I got an F on not an exam, on an entire course in
Me
college
too. All
as
of
an
high
undergrad,
school.
right?
The whole thing.
The whole thing. The whole thing. So, in the book I published, I spent as much time editing it as I did writing it.
I
And then
bet.
someone who's really good, not me, at editing came in and just bloodied the hell out of it. And I was like, oh man, thank God, because I don't, I knew that you'd be smarter than me at this. So thank you for fixing all this stuff. And I'm pretty good at grammar, but not great. And so if you're right, if you can create that mindset, cool. We're just getting reps where we can learn more. That's great. If you watch, and I'm sure you don't since you're not into sports, there's a documentary, Hard Knocks, right now. It's about football, the pros. Mike Tomlin is the head coach for the Steelers, pro football. Early on, this receiver drops a ball, just like you said, in the game, and it's it's at the beginning, so it's not as integral. And the guy comes off bad body language, upset at himself, and Tomlin's right in his face. This play doesn't define you, and this play doesn't define this game. We got plenty more to go.
What a
We're
great
focusing.
message.
We're focusing on the next rep. We're focusing on the next route or whatever he's got to do. This play does not define you, and it does not define this game. Let's go. So
Yeah.
that's why you have military examples with Ray Dalio, a financial guy, and you bring the football thing. It's the same deal. Build
All of it, it's
athletes.
the game of life, it's the
Yes.
challenge, it's this mountain we have to climb, whatever your lane is, whether that's an athletics lane, whether that's military, whether that's business, whatever it is, regardless of which lane it is, there's a relational dance that takes place with you and the men and women that you're surrounded by.
Mhm.
And how do we make all those ships rise with the tide? And I think I also put on there, on that paper somewhere, I typed in figuring out whose race I was running. Is that
Yep.
on there?
Yes,
What
sir.
was the question that you'd asked there?
Um, the one thing I want to ask you about with training was you said in spite of, and then the thing about teammates, things that come out of your mouth, how you communicate. What are one or two things that have been critical for your ability to work with people? You said sense of security and understanding whose race I'm running.
Yeah, so something I did, and I would say as a young man would be ideal, but this is like up until more recently as I heard this statement, was you got 30 athletes on a line and the gun goes off and you're running a race. And if you think about that metaphorically in terms of life, when somebody starts beating you, if you're running this race of life really, really well and in a healthy way, you get to look at them and say, dude, good for you. I'm so glad you're winning your race. I'm going to run my race and I'm going to win my race. You run yours and you win yours. So even if we're doing the same thing, I get to celebrate somebody else's success. I don't have to look at that as a value statement on my lack of success or my lack of ability. I get to look at somebody and say, dude, you are kicking ass at your race. I'm going to keep running mine until I kick ass at mine, and I might struggle, I might grow, I might weaken, I might strengthen. I'm going to go through my mountains and valleys, right? But I'm going to keep running my race. And what that means is that I get to celebrate you and your race, and that doesn't get to compromise me and the way I interact with you, right? And I've been in too many team environments where my insecurities have taken over. And I've been like, man, people are listening to that guy more than they're listening to me. That sucks. But if I just come out and say, hey guys, I want to freaking make sure that you guys are relying on Joe for this one aspect because he's got a lot better ideas than I have, and he seems to be kind of funneling us in a really positive direction. So let's make sure that we're looking to him for that aspect of this project. People look at me and go, oh, okay, that's awesome. And now you're not an insecure leader. Now you're somebody who's going, oh, this person's better at me than this. I'm going to hand the reins over to him because I want us to succeed as a team. And I can identify that in that small race, he's running his and he's winning. And that's so badass. And I can just say, dude, you run it, man. So when in that team environment, allowing those insecurities to take over is an ultimate breakdown of a team. And it's really, really ugly. And as I get more healthy and more secure, I guess, as an adult, I can walk up to that person and say, dude, will you work with me? I really want to be good at this and you're better at it than I am. Will you show me kind of how you approach this? Because I'll probably never be as good as you. But back to that value statement, I'm okay with that because that doesn't get to define me or be a value statement in my life. But I also do want to be better at it because I'm extremely interested or passionate about it. Can you work with me? And instead of that person being like, yeah, this fucking cock's trying to freaking do what I do, he can be like, dude, why wouldn't I want to talk to somebody about what I'm already super passionate about and really good at? Why wouldn't I get to take on that role? And you can start breaking down walls. Something I do in a class is I've had quite a few people come through my precision rifle courses where like their boss made them come through because that's part of their career path. And they're like, dude, I've already freaking been through it. You know, like this guy can't teach me nothing. And what I do is I've got this weird game I play, and I'll kind of go around the room and I'll be like, oh, you shoot competition, you shoot competitively. And they'll be like, yeah. And so then later in the class, you know, their walls are up, their shields are up. Cause like, you know, who am I to teach them anything?
Well, you were talking about how when you're securing yourself as a athlete or a coach or a leader and someone else is shining their stars, metaphorically shining a little bit brighter, it's totally cool. And you're not weakened by that, which is true. And to your example of having to run that half marathon, these guys that run the show early in the year asked me to do this swim with them across the Hudson River of all fucking places. But these they raise a lot of money for the SEALs and special veterans and the Gold Star families, things like that. You know, so it's a big deal. And so like this last event in August, we all raised over $700,000.
Wow, good for you guys.
People that are suffering like that. So, hey Jim, do you want us? You know, will you swim with us next year? Sure.
Of course I will.
Yes, and my background is strength athlete, so powerlifting and strongman, and it's not cardio.
Yeah.
The point of the story is this, though. On Saturday, 2 days ago, I was swimming again. And, you know, it's a learning curve, man, for me. I've only been doing it 6 months. And when I say 6 months, like 6 months ago, a swim workout was 10 lengths of 25 feet. And I'm breaking after each 10. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah.
So now I got this 22-year-old college swimmer coaching me, teaching me. I just turned 50.
Yeah.
And he's teaching me. He's lights out. So now I've progressed. And then on Saturday, I had a good session. I knew going into it I had more time, so I wanted to push, and I did. So next to me, in the lane next to me, is this young lady, and she is fucking smoking me. Like, her stroke is perfect. Flip turns, you know, no brakes, just a machine, back and forth, going into different strokes, and just going and going. So I'm right at an hour with my, you know, anyways, I swam 2,000 meters.
Good for you.
And so it was a huge PR by 400 meters because my first big goal was 500, and then it was a mile. Now it's 2,000. And trying to get this workout in, I'm working on and I'm watching this girl. And I know in the amount of time that I swam that 2,000, I know she at least doubled me. She's tiny, you know, small levers, and she's just outstanding. And one time she was actually braking when I was braking, which isn't hard to believe because I broke a lot. And I had to turn to her and I go, man, you are awesome. I'm just trying to survive over here. You are just awesome. She goes, yeah, I've been swimming a long time. I compete. I go, yeah, clearly. So I'm just, man, good job.
Yeah.
And she goes, man, thanks. I go, all right, not to make it weird, I'm back to swimming here, but, you know, and when we're done, I'm going to have a question or two, you know. And, you know, I did. Because I went about my elbow or whatever, and I was like, damn. So I come home. My wife goes, how'd it go? I said, I had a great time. And she goes, really? It was 2,000 meters. It was the best I've ever done, the longest I've ever gone. And she goes, great. I go, hey, did you meet anybody else? Because I always talk to people. I said, well, this chick next to me, I think she did 4,000 or 5,000, somewhere close to that. She goes, really? Yeah, she was outstanding. But when you're humble, and you can listen to Jocko's podcast all the time, talks about being humble, it's easier to learn because you're open to it.
Right.
And so I was just humbled. I was like, wow, I suck compared to her, but whatever. So I got 2 pieces of information on my stroke with my elbow, and I'm like, perfect. Next time I'm in the water, that was today, Monday.
Stronger.
I'm better.
Yeah.
I'm better for it. I'm
100%.
working on this piece, and I'm like, oh, I've improved.
Yeah,
So to your point, it works.
it does.
To sum it all up, to sum it
It
up.
does. There's a guy out there. He's I think he's pretty well known right now. Um, his name's Cody Alford. He's a retired MARSOC guy. He's got tattoos all over his face and his head, and he's got a company called We Defy the Norm, and he's really big into like mental health right now and helping young men on their journey. And we were in the Marine Corps together, and he was one of my junior Marines. And it was interesting. Last year we drove to SHOT Show together, and I remember we were talking about, our last deployment together was 20 years ago, and we were having conversations about it. And I said, I remember you being scared to death that whole deployment. And this he's twice my size in sheer muscle mass. I mean, he's a beast of a man. And he looked at me not really insulted, more inquisitive, and was like, I don't remember being scared at all. And I said, you were scared 24/7, but not of going into war or combat. You were scared to death that we wouldn't see you as a contribution because you were a junior Marine. You were scared to death that we didn't see you as value add. You were scared to death that you weren't pulling your weight. You were scared to death to not have the approval of your senior Marines. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, I was scared to death that whole deployment. He said, you're right. And we started talking. I said, and I was such a shitty leader to you. And he was like, how do you figure? And I said, Cody, you were that obnoxious 19-year-old kid that was naturally good at everything you did. And I knew that within a year and a half, you were going to surpass me in your leadership capabilities, in your abilities as an infantryman, as your abilities as a sniper. I knew in a year and a half, I would be left in your dust. And a real leader at that time would have looked at you and said, man, I bet I can reduce that year and a half down to a year. I bet I can make him surpass me in a year through good mentorship. And I would have sat you down and I would have said, Cody, this is what I see in you. And you're naturally better at this than I am. And I think that in this time frame, you're going to be off to the races. But I think that I can help you shorten that through giving you the mentorship that I've learned along my path. And I was really ashamed looking back at the leader that I was to him because of my own insecurities blocking him winning his own race, if that makes sense. And obviously I've learned a lot since then through 20 years of counseling and growth and being able to look in a big ugly mirror and say, not I'm ugly, so I'm going to burn the world, but I'm ugly. And how do I change that? How do I work on that? How do I turn around and change that into something that is flourishing? Or I look at the reflection in the mirror and I say, dude, you're all right. Like 100%, you're good to go, dude. And yeah, you're not the best at everything and you won't be. There's certain things that you're amazing at. There's other things that you really suck at. And then there's other things that you're setting the bar right about medium on. And that's all okay. And because those other places where you suck, somebody else is amazing at, and we get to be cheerleaders for them and watch them grow in that. Or I get to continue working on it. It's okay. But it took me years and years and years and a ton of growth work to be able to get to that point. And I think that these are a lot of the conversations that Pat Ivy and I have had. Pat's like one of my superheroes. It was really funny. At Winter Strong, Pat's a giant human being. Like he's a freaking shaved silverback. That dude is a giant man, right? And what scares me about Pat is not only is he this big, huge human being, he's also really smart, right? So now he's dangerous, right?
PhD.
He's a brilliant mind, and he's also like physically a machine, right? Well, I remember being at Winter Strong, and there's a 1,000-yard range at Winter Strong, and it's got a slight, probably a 4 to 6 degree incline the entire length of the 1,000 yards. Well, we ran this competition at Winter Strong, and by the time they get to my station, which is the long range precision station, they're just dying, these dudes, because they've run like 3 miles at this point, carried giant sandbags, freaking pulled chains down, climbed ropes, done all this stuff. And so they're just brutalized at this point. I remember watching these guys have to run 800 yards to my location up this grade. And this like group of adults that are all athletes are just like trying not to vomit. They're dying, right? And Pat is running backwards, right, ahead of the whole pack. And he was like, don't forget to breathe. You guys are doing awesome. Keep it up, guys. Keep it, like, not out of breath, like running backwards, and this crew could not keep up with him. And I was like, Pat, you are now probably one of the most dangerous men I know. Like, I have a plan for men like you, and it's usually like kick him in the nuts and run. But like, now I'm just going to have to shoot you because now you can run. Like, men your size typically can't run, but like, you can run. You're a giant human being, and you're also a brilliant mind. You're very dangerous as a man, right?
Yes.
But
a D lineman.
yeah, he's a beast.
Pro football, he's Matt.
Yeah, so he and I always kind of find a corner and go down some rabbit holes just because I like tapping into his brain. But one of the things that really roped me into Pat, and I didn't know his accomplishments at the time because he didn't walk up and be like, hey, I'm Pat Ivey, here's my resume, right? He didn't do that. But the first time we met, he came up and he was like, hey, I was told to come talk to you. And I said, what's that? And he said, man, I just linked up with this old timer. He kind of got me into hunting. I got the bug, but I don't know how to shoot. I don't know anything about guns. Would you show me how to start this process? So all I see is, this 6'6" monster, but like a guy who's very humble saying, I don't know what I'm doing. Will you show me? Because I don't even know what I don't know. Right. Come to find out later, like he coached this team of coaches that was very feared and very intimidating, and everybody wanted to be on that freaking team. And like Bert Soren later is telling me stories about him walking up cold, like racking a 500-pound squat and being like, rack it, bitch, let's go. Like, just, you know what I mean? Just like this beast of a dude. And I'm like, the Pat Ivey that I know is like kind and gentle and humble. And Bert's like, oh, there's a whole different side to this freaking animal that you don't know, right? But I was so impressed. And I didn't know at the time that he was Dr. Pat Ivey. I had no idea he had a PhD. His problem solving.
His wife.
Yeah, I know. Since then, I've learned a lot about that. And his daughters are apparently brains as well. And but what I didn't know was I had this man that was stronger than me, probably far more intelligent than me, very much way more educated than me, right? And accolade wise in the world of academia and athletics is so much further along than I will ever even dream about being. Yet he didn't come to me that way. He came to me as a total student and was like, hey, you have some knowledge that I would love to learn. Will you teach me? And that's what I first learned about Pat Ivey. Later, I learned about all of his accomplishments, and it was just remarkable who he is and how he approached me in the beginning. And now he's in superhero status in my life, right? I mean, he's like this, I know this dude who's like badass. He's a freaking animal. Also, he's a brilliant mind and is very inquisitive. And I found that to be such a strong characteristic of Pat Ivey, was that he showed up inquisitive, not trying to own that moment, if that makes sense.
Right. When we were working together on a couple episodes, so he's telling me his background and his story. You know, his mom's from Birmingham and his dad's from like rural Georgia, but the parents met in inner city Detroit, where he grew up, and then he goes from inner city Detroit to Missouri to play college football, and it's, you know, kind of rural out there, and a lot of those guys on the team, they like to go hunting with their uncles and their brothers and cousins and such. And so in the middle of the episode, or maybe it was afterwards, he paused it and pulls this big, huge 10-point buck off the shelf that he had mounted and stuff. And I was like, so damn, cool. That's big. And he was like, hey, man, check this out.
He's so proud of it. I love it.
I did this.
So good.
And I go, man, you're just an inner city country good old boy, aren't you? I go, explain that to me. He goes, well, my mom and dad were this, and I lived here, but I played football with these guys. So he's all about, you know, being in the inner city Detroit, but he's also a good old boy at the same time. And he's like, I'm like, that's who you are? He goes, yeah, that's who I am. And he was super cool about it. And I was like, oh man, it was a gift.
Yeah.
And I forget who introduced me to Pat. Shoot. Maybe a Mickey Marotti? I don't know. Anyways, outstanding guy, and I'm glad he connected. And the thing about this show is, one, I get continuing education every Monday night. But two, most of my guests now are guests is that the referrals.
That's cool.
And it's the underlying theme is these other people are good at what they do, and they want to help.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I don't need anything more than that.
Yeah.
So if you're smart or something you want to help, I'm like, cool. If I got one listener, great. If I have 1,000, even better, more impact.
Yeah,
But
very cool.
whatever, I'm just having a good time.
Yeah.
I know we've been going a while, and I'll learn. Yeah, I can go for hours. Like I said, I got 2.5 hours worth of questions. But the before I always finish with these rapid fire questions at the end. Anything else you wanted to get off your chest, or say, or pontificate about, or you have a question for us,
I think that
or anything?
kind of like to bring a lot of what I was saying together, and this is probably kind of how why Pat had talked to me about jumping on this podcast with you, is that that idea that I've talked about, the order of three or whatever, that concept of identity has become really an interesting platform, and I would I would say that this has become one of the most important, I guess, approaches that I've ever had when it comes to speaking into people's lives, whether they're Bert likes to say thin air and deep water. When you're going for the absolute maximum of whatever you're going for, whether that's being a mountain climber, being a football player, whatever, you're going to the top of Everest. You're not stopping. You want to maximize everything you can within that lane. Where that concept are you okay if I touch on that for a minute? What that means, the order of three?
100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
so where that came from is one of my closest friends was my medic. He was my corpsman on one of my deployments. And anyway, long story super short, I was kind of getting a weird feeling from him. He stopped texting, and then got weird. I literally was scared, and so I literally put on some body armor, went and kicked his door in because he wouldn't respond to me and he wouldn't open his door. And so it was concealment body armor. I didn't put on a plate carrying a helmet and go freaking door kicking, but I knew what he carried on his bedside. So I was like, if I kick his door in, this guy might literally just freaking send one. I have no idea, but he's in a bad place. And so I kick in the door to my buddy's place and basically walk into what looked like a modern day opium den. And not only was it looked like a modern day opium den, it was like helmets and body armor and night vision and, military paraphernalia everywhere. So now he's this psycho veteran. And he kind of wakes up and he's like, like I thought, he wakes up with a handgun in his hand. And he's like, what are you doing here? And I said, dude, what's going on? And he was like, what do you mean what's going on? What are you doing here? I was like, dude, we've been through way too much together. You lie to me again, I'm going to clink you in the head with this freaking helmet. Just come clean with it. And he was like, it's cocaine. And I said, how bad? And he said, it's bad, dude. It's been a couple of years that I've been down this rabbit hole. And as a medic, I realized I could do this more efficiently. So I've been injecting it. And I was like, oh, it's like one step shy of heroin bad. He's like, yeah. And I was like, okay. So anyway, my wife and I reroute our tithing money for the next month. We pay for him to go. Thank God he had TRICARE as a retired veteran. Paid for most of it. We get him set up in this inpatient program. And anyway, I fly to San Antonio. I rent a car and I drop him off at the front door because I was like, he's not going to go. This is the scariest thing ever. You know what I mean? As an addict to literally leave it all behind. Well, he stays down there for double the time, takes advantage of all the follow-on programs. He's clean now. It's a wonderful story. But while he was there, I started writing, and I was in this journal, and I'm going, all right, God, what is so screwed up about us? Why are we veterans so fucked up? Why do we all come back from being in the military and go down this loathing route? And what came out on that paper was now what I call the concept I call the order of three. And what that concept is it's the three things that I believe we as adult, and like I said, it doesn't apply strictly to veterans. It applies to every adult human being, men, women. It's not gender specific. And what these three things are is what I believe the three things that we as adults spend most of our lives desperately pursuing. And that's our identity, our purpose in life, and our calling. And what do those mean to us? And the reason why I call it the order of three is because I believe we do it out of order 100% of the time. And what I mean by that is we start backwards, and the order I said them in should be the order that we fall down that rabbit hole First of all, our identity, then our purpose in life, then our calling. And you can take the word calling and you can interchange that word for passionate pursuit, daily grind, career path, whatever it is, right? But then our purpose is more like our mission statement for life, right? And then our identity is who we are, not what we are. And the dangerous thing about this is that we do it out of order. And what I mean by that is we start with a calling. As a young man, I was very interested in the profession of soldiering. So I followed that path, and that was my calling. And from that calling, I developed a sense of purpose. And I developed what I would call a very temporary sense of purpose, because my sense of purpose in the Marine Corps, in the Army, was both standing firm for the man to my left and the man to my right, and fight for this country, stand firm for whatever the mission called for, right? And then from that sense of purpose, which is, like I said, either a false or a temporary sense of purpose, we develop what I would call a false sense of identity. 10 years ago, if you were to say, oh, you're a sniper, I would have said, yeah, it's not just what I do, it's who I am. He even says it in the latest Maverick movie, the latest Top Gun movie. He's like, I'm a naval aviator. It's not just what I do, it's who I am. Well, what happens if I get glaucoma and go blind? You ever heard of a blind sniper? It's not a thing, right? And so if that's who I am, I've allowed the what I am, the what being a sniper. If I allow the what to become the who, I am living on very volatile ground, because if I allow the what to become the who, the what can be snatched from me at any given time in life, based on perspective, based on circumstance. I might be a passionate freaking conservative one day and then turn into a freaking passionate liberal the freaking following year, right? I might be super into long-range precision shooting and lose my interest in that and then really focus on skydiving or scuba diving or whatever. I might be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company and get fired, and I've got to dig ditches the following week to make ends meet. If I allow the what I am to dictate and define the who I am, I live on very, very rocky ground, right? And if you identify and you say my identity is an Olympic level athlete, but then you get in a car accident and you're now a paraplegic, who are you now? If I say I'm a husband, that's who I am. But then next week my wife says, screw you, I'm out. She leaves. Now who am I? If we allow the what to become the who, it's very, very dangerous. And so what ends up happening is we follow this calling, which I think is a wonderful calling, the profession of soldiering. And I go into the military. It's a wonderful calling. And it gives me a sense of purpose for that time in my life. That's great. But if I allow my identity to be shaped and molded by an organization that, honest to God, doesn't give a shit about me, I'm a number to them. Well, when I get out, that means whether it's consciously or subconsciously, I knew that when I got out, whether that was through medical discharge, just getting out and ending my contract, or full retirement, I know that at that time I am willfully handing my identity back to an organization that doesn't care about me. Right? Now, who am I? Because I'm no longer Marine, right? And you can say all you want, once a Marine, always a Marine, right? That's a freaking big yutter thing we say in the Marine Corps, right? But the reality is I'm no longer in the Marine Corps. I am no longer a Marine for a living, right? I was a Marine. I was a sniper. I was an infantryman, right? I am a father. I am a husband. But those are billets that I hold. Those are what I am. They're not who I am. And so the problem that I see with the veteran community, well, it started with me finding this kind of concept through the veteran community, but I believe it extends to everybody. And I think that is just as severe in the athletics community as it is, or in the world of athletics, that it is in the military, first responder, whatever it is I am a sniper for a job, or I was a sniper. Now I teach snipers or whatever for a job, but that's not who I am. And when you start to ask yourself, who are you? The first thing people say is, oh, I'm an attorney. I'm a veterinarian. Okay, that's what you are. I didn't ask what you are. I asked who you are. And when you look in the mirror and ask that question, it's the hardest question you'll ever ask yourself, because the response I want when I ask that question is, tell me who you are, and it can't be something that can be taken from you. It can't be something that can be changed, and it can't be something that you can be stripped of. Any of those by choice, circumstance, or perspective, right? So if I'm an athlete, well, that can be stripped of me. I can get into a car accident. I can lose interest, right? Perspective, circumstance, right? If I'm a father, that can be taken from me through circumstance, through freaking my kids just disowning me, whatever it is, right? My kids die in a car accident or a plane crash, that can be taken from me, right? So I would ask anybody that is going Mach 2 to the top of that mountain, who are you? Because if this thing that you find your identity in gets taken from you either by circumstance, choice, or perspective, and you're stripped of it, now who are you? So when you're alone in a dark room and there's no doors and no mirrors and you're naked, there's no mirrors to look at, there's no voice to listen to other than your own, who are you? And that question is very, very challenging for about 105% of people that I've ever asked it to. In fact, most of them have never been able to give me an answer. And then we go to purpose, right? Our identity and who we are should define our purpose. And our purpose is a life's purpose. And right now I can tell you from a secular standpoint, I can tell you that from my faith-based standpoint, my purpose in life is to be the hands and feet of Christ, to love everybody I can unconditionally in the best way I possibly can in this world for the rest of my life. My wife does that as a therapist. I can't tell you how many teenage kids she's helped walk away from their suicide leaps and start believing in themselves. I do it because I get to be around 1 million young men a year that I'm training on either on a rifle range or through a seminar, and I get to say, you're so much more than a trigger puller. That's not who you are. That's just something you do, right? But my life's purpose in my faith-based perspective is to be the hands and feet of Christ. From a secular standpoint, I would say, to define that, I would say my life's purpose is to provide for and protect and to uplift and uphold the community that I live among, right? That would be my life's purpose. And I can do that from a wheelchair, and I can do that from on top of a pair of skis, or I can do that while being a CEO of a company. I can do the way that manifests is going to manifest a trillion different ways, but that is my life's purpose. And it doesn't matter what job I have. It doesn't matter what career path or hobbies or how life changes. That will be my life's purpose. And it might take different shapes, but that's still my life's purpose. And then you get to my calling. Well, right now my calling is to train long-range precision guys on how to understand their optics and firearms better, and with my personal company to design and develop products that support their needs as snipers. Well, next week I might buy 3 freaking laundromats and own laundromats and get rid of my rifles and start skydiving more, because I haven't skydived in a couple of years, and I might just deep dive back into that. And so my calling, if I've done this order properly, starting with my identity, which is basically who God made me to be, founded in that. And that doesn't get to change, right? I was born of royal blood. I'm the chosen son of the one true king. I was born worth it, and I was born enough, and nothing I can do can ever change that. No successes I have can change that. No failures I have can change that. No mistakes or successes can define me in any different way. He's defined me. That doesn't anyway, like, you start with that identity, and then that leads to your purpose. And the reality is that if I leave the calling as last, not first, the calling doesn't get to dictate my purpose, and then the purpose doesn't get to dictate my identity. Calling is last. That means that my calling can change 1,000 times in my life, and my purpose remains true, and my identity remains foundationally unshakable. But what we do as military guys, as law enforcement officers, as firefighters, as first responders, as athletes, as people going for the Olympic level of whatever we're doing, that is our passion. That becomes our pursuit, which we turn into a calling. That calling turns around and defines a purpose for our life, which is just a very temporary or faulty purpose. And we allow that purpose to give us an identity that we don't actually hold. Right? And we allow the world to dictate an identity to us, when in all reality is, if we found firm who we were from day one, and we identified our purpose in life, our calling can change 1,000 times, and it holds no sway over who we are. That's the what we are, not the who we are. Right? And if we understand who we are on that foundational level, now we're free to say, I'm going to try this, and I might suck at it, but it doesn't matter. Because I was born worth it, I was born enough, and nothing I can do in failure or success can change that. So I'm going to give it a shot. And if I fail, I might come to several conclusions. Okay, I didn't like that. That's definitely not a path I want to take. I didn't enjoy anything about that, but I gave it a shot, right? Gave it the old college try. Or I might look at that and go, man, that's badass. I want to do that. And here's where I failed. So this is what I need to do to work on it. Or I might look at it and go, dude, that's super cool. I've realized that I'm not as passionate about it as I wanted to be. So I don't know if I'm going to try it again, but I'm going to think about it. But if I do try it again, now I know where to start training and pursue better, more healthier ways of training for that so that I can be successful. But either way, it was an awesome experience and I might have failed miserably, but man, I learned so much. It was really incredible. Right?
Yeah, my goodness, that's a, a deep line in today's episode. And, it's hard and challenging. Like, ask parents or coaches who are not trained or good at that. They're molding people, and it's super hard and impactful. In some areas, like what we do here, was kind of close, but not really. Like in the book or the course that I put out, like we start with identity, your core values, who are you, and I identify mine, and say, hey, go ahead and copy mine or come up with your own, but you should come up with them. And further, what are your habits that amplify those values? And so our mantra is win the day. And so even if you win the Super Bowl and tomorrow you retire, there's still tomorrow's things to do that give you fulfillment. Because if you win the Super Bowl, like Tom Brady wins all the time, and he couldn't walk away. He walked away from his family. He's still in he's in the broadcast booth now. Like, he can't leave the sport, right? And I tell my athletes, hey, if you win or you lose, like, you want the information, but tomorrow's still coming, and you're trying to be the best version of yourself. So maybe you don't need to squat 500 because you're not playing anymore, but you still got to squat and make yourself, physically something. So the win the day doesn't end whenever your sport ends or your career ends. I mean, my whole background is not athletics. I have an MBA. I worked at JP Morgan. It was high finance with the really, really, really rich people, 5 million minimum. And it was just, I'm like, this isn't what I want to do.
Yeah.
And people, the lady at the gym that came in today goes, man, you've been doing this a long time. I go, nah, 12 years. And she's like, wow, like, I see all the white
all the
in
gray,
your beard.
right?
You're like, what the fuck? Like, what else you been doing?
You'll get there, like, Lucas. Stop laughing. You'll get there.
I was in finance and investment. She's like, what happened? I goes, moving on to something different. And she goes, oh, okay. And you just said it so much better about the purpose. I have a tattoo that says AMDG, and it's acronym. It's Latin for God's greater glory. Grew up Catholic. The Jesuits, that's their mantra, for God's greater glory. So that's it's something I believe in. But you just phrased it better and put it all more succinctly. So now I get to steal it.
Yeah,
and I'll give credit. I'll give credit. But man, that's awesome. Like, what a gift to have that perspective and clarity of what I want to do with the kids in my life and at the gym, or even adults. And if I can help tap into that, there's a lot more peace. The anxiety goes way down.
Yeah.
Because, hey, like you said, whether I succeed or fail, I'm still okay. I'm still enough. Yeah. And it's okay to not have everyone like what you put out on social media. God knows I don't get a lot of likes on my content, but all I ever do is put out stuff that helps people, so whatever. It was just, it's a workable equation, and it's something that you could build up because it's true.
Yeah, I don't know how this was truly like, I was literally like angry, cussing, and praying all at the same time on this journal. And I truly feel like God just put that kind of on my heart, and it became, like you said, it's a tangible equation that I can look at and say A plus B doesn't equal C. I need to reverse that because A plus B equals C. What I've been doing was C to B to A. And now the foundation's at the top, the very peak is at the bottom. So this whole freaking pyramid's going to topple at some point, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Lucas? We started talking at the same time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what you were saying earlier, because where I'm at, whenever I deal with, the demographic I'm in, inner city kids, it's, when you talk about identity and purpose and calling, it's interesting because I got a lot of kids that don't have a two-parent household, don't
Right.
have resources. Their mentors are not. They're a lot of them don't have dads, or maybe they don't have a mom or whatever. Their mentors and their leadership isn't coming from their home.
Right.
That's for sure. So they find it in other places, and a lot of it ends up being, you know, uh, unfortunately, what it ends up being is a mentor. It ends up being somebody they don't know. Like uh, their mentor will be an idol. Like you ask them, who's your biggest mentor or idol, and they're going to say somebody like a professional athlete or
Right.
LeBron James. It's what you talked about earlier, way earlier in the podcast was, dads being like a prominent father figure is has a lot to do with a lot of the guys you worked with success, right? And you don't see a lot of that where I'm at. And as you're talking about purpose and identity, and I see a lot of these kids that I work with, it's you know their identity is all in is revolves completely around their sport. They well, I'm such and such, and I'm a basketball player, and this is who I am, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is everything that revolves around this. And um, you know, so I don't think for me as a coach, being able to hear that and kind of think about it and like break it down for me and um, use it where I'm at. It's kind of cool to hear that and then think about where I'm at because it's so very true how upside down it is. Our kids' foundations are upside down. Um, their identity is what they do, um, which is a lot of times their sport. That's who they are, um, and that's the what is their what or the what is their who
Exactly. Yeah,
essentially.
they take the what, they
And I
make it the
see that,
who, and it's dangerous.
and it's every single one of
Yeah,
them. It's not just a kid here, a kid here, a kid here. It's every single one of them. There is no there really is no foundation to who they are as a person outside of, unfortunately, athletics, or in some cases, some of them are in the streets, some of them are
sure.
doing that kind of stuff, and that's it's challenging for me because I'm on my Christmas break because I work in the school systems. When I get back to work, I have to figure out you know this one's been this conversation's been good for me because it's allowed me to kind of self reflect on what I need to try to figure out how to do and how, approach things a little differently. I've tried all kinds of different things. I've changed things week after week, semester after semester to make it work for where I'm at. And we were talking about feedback loops. I feel like I'm on the bottom end of a feedback loop right now,
Yeah,
and I got to figure out how to get it back up. You know, um, but understanding that our kids' identity, now that I think about it like that, our foundation is upside down. It's good stuff,
appreciate it.
and I see it every day.
My wife is brilliant at this. Like, and I wish that half the time that I'm talking about this or on some sort of podcast going through this, I feel like going, hey, hang on, let me call my wife. She's better at this than I am because she's taught me so much and mentored me in certain, like there was certain things that I didn't understand. I figured out when my daughter was young that my pickup truck was a magical place. And the pickup truck was magical because a couple reasons. One, she was allowed to listen to whatever music she wanted. And as much as I hate Taylor Swift, I know every freaking lyric to every song because we roll down the road screaming our heads off to freaking whoever, right? But I kind of picked up on this weird thing that she would be way more open to me in the truck. And I was like, it's got to be something to do with us sitting shoulder to shoulder going in the same direction together versus me sitting across the table at her, right? There's got to be something safe for her about sitting side by side going in the same direction together, right? And then my wife was like, oh, yeah, dummy, there's psychology to back that up. And here's why, and then she's like, have you ever tried this or thought about that? I'm like, well, no. And then you try it and it's like, geez, and Crow, you're a genius, right? But she's taught me so much, and some of the stuff that she's taught me, she's got these little one-liners like it's hard to hate somebody up close. Like I'm the biggest hater in the world. I'm a shit talking son of a bitch, right? But she's like, that guy that you're making fun of, because I make fun of every dude in the world that wears skinny jeans. Like I probably will never stop. She's like, that guy who's dressed that way, you go over and hear his story, and then it's going to be hard to hate him. Like, you hear his story up close, you learn that individual's some of their story and some of the stuff and trials and tribulations that they've gone through, you're going to have a hard time hating them. You're probably going to end up in their corner cheering them on, right? And it's that one line she's said to me for years. It's hard to hate someone up close. It's forced me to take a step back and say, man, I wonder what that guy's doing. It's forced me when somebody like cuts me off on the road, like going Mach 2, I automatically now I'm like, man, I hope everything's okay, because if I drive like that, it's probably because there's somebody I love in the hospital, you know, and be gracious with my assumptions as opposed
I never say that.
Yeah, I never have until she started challenging me this way, you know, because I was the guy that was like, dude, I'm going to go teach that guy a lesson, downshift, slip my foot off the clutch, and now I'm burning out and be like, I'll show you what it's like to get cut off, you freaking prick. You know, like that's where I would go for most of my life, right? And, but now she's taught me these things, or she's said certain things in my life that I'm like, doggone, I have been looking at this so wrong. And what really turned the tides for me as far as my perspective change on a lot of this was, all right, so you're going to have to edit the shit out of this one. This is probably like your worst podcast for editing. I'm so sorry. But it needs to be like one of your questionnaires, like, are you doing this from a shipping container? Like, negative, find a new place. But a lot of this perspective change, like I said, like first 40 years of my life, and now I'm in my mid 40s, but first 40 years of my life, I was just such a violent asshole with my words, with my freaking actions, with everything. It was very intense. And what changed a lot of that was, my 40th birthday present started right after my 39th birthday. And I write in a journal a lot. And, my wife had this custom handmade leather-bound journal built for me. And then for a year before my 40th, that journal ended up traveling to 36 states and 3 different countries. And anybody who played a significant role in my life in 40 years wrote a page in that journal. And it was like, I bet that journal's got $8,000 worth of shipping on it right now as far as that. And she had this massive spreadsheet, and it went around, and there was some well-known names in there of men that I've come to build relationships with that have been mentors in my life. And, you know, people like Kyle Lamb, I don't know if you know that name, but Viking Tactics, Green Eyes, Black Rifles. He was like, you know, the demigod of Mogadishu. He's, you know, one of the most incredible Delta Force men as far as well-known names to come out of Delta Force ever. And he's been a mentor to me over the years. And anyway, some really, really remarkable people that I grew up reading their stuff, looking at as kind of giants in the military world. They're in my journal, you know, and, anyway, I can't read that journal in front of people because I'll break down like a baby when I read it. But what I read in that journal is 40 years of grace and affirmation that I don't deserve. I read in there 40 years of people seeing me through an entirely different lens than I see myself. And I realized I've been given 1,000-fold more grace than I've ever given people. And I've withheld that based on judging people or my own perspective. And you got a guy that grows up, as an example, you work with these kids in the inner city. Well, 15 years ago, I'd have been like, quit being a bitch. Yeah, life's hard. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and freaking move on with your life. Oh, you don't have money for college? Oh, great. Join the military, dickhead. They give it to you. Like, I would have just freaking, I mean, you want to talk about judgment and freaking criticism. I would have been your number one dude, you know? And now I look at it and I look at that kid from the inner city and I'm like, dude has no tools. Like, he has never been mentored on how to pull himself up by his bootstraps. So how do I get this kid? Literally hold him up against a wall and just say, I don't give a shit what anybody tells you. You're enough. Like, and you have everything you need, dude. And I'm here to freaking stand by your side the whole way. How do we do that? You know? And my perspective drastically changed when I read that journal and completely altered the way I choose to see the world. And I say choose because it's a choice, because my default's still criticism and judgment. Like, that's still like the first place I go. You say you never think about that when people cut you off. Neither do I. I force myself to say it, and I force myself to think it, because my first thought is like, you cut me off, dude. You know what it's like to get freaking T-boned by a pickup truck? Let's do this. This is 350 horsepower freaking old school diesel, right? They're Clydesdales, bitch. They ain't Shetland ponies. Stand by, right? And like, that's where my brain goes. And now I say, no, that guy might have a freaking pregnant wife in the backseat. That dude might be trying to get to say goodbye to his mother or father who's on their deathbed right now. Like, and I reframe that mindset, and I change the story I'm telling myself. My internal dialogue changes. I'm not saying all this stuff because I've gotten it right for 40 years. I've screwed it up for 40 years, and I've chosen to allow those lessons to mold instead of reject them. You know what I mean? And I am nowhere near where I want to be. I'm just on a path in that direction. What's that, Lucas?
Always under construction.
Yeah.
And you never really arrive.
Yeah.
And I empathize and sympathize with my gut instinct on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because it's not great. It's not great. I got cut off today.
Yeah.
On the way back from the gym, and I was like, I'm on his ass. I'm pissed. You know, and it's not because there's a pregnant wife in there. It's because he's a young, immature kid, like I was.
Yeah, 100%.
Doing the same thing.
Guilty as charged, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. So, man, I know you do your own training, right? You got squat rack. What do you like to listen to?
So like, I listen to a lot of old school punk rock. Usually my music goes from like either old school country, like when I say old school, like Marty Robbins era, George Jones, storytelling country, like back in the day when they were telling stories, right?
Yep.
And it,
Waylon?
Yeah. Waylon, I mean, yeah, the Highwaymen, all of it. But it's either there or it's like punk rock or psychobilly. So I'm going from Johnny Cash to Pennywise, right? And some hardcore stuff, even some old, like The Bodies. It's like probably some underground punk rock that people aren't even going to know. But Epitaph Records, old school Epitaph Records stuff. Either that.
Sorry,
no,
go
ahead. What were you going to say?
What's an adventure you haven't done, but you want to go with your wife?
With my wife? That would probably be like wine country in Italy, I believe would be her dream. One of her dreams was to go island hop Greece, and I took her and did that on her 40th a few years back. And so that was one that was pretty epic. So my wife loves to sit on the beach and drink margaritas and enjoy that type of vacation. And a vacation for me is probably more like a sufferfest where I'm like, let's go climb freaking Kilimanjaro or, whatever. Kili's not supposed to be that hard, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like I want to go do something epic. So if I'm doing it with my wife, it would probably, one of her dreams would be touring Italy. And if I was doing an adventure without my wife, it would be like dropped off in the middle of nowhere with a puddle plane in the backcountry of Alaska and then going and freaking executing a DIY moose hunt and packing that bastard out, fighting wolves the whole way.
2,000 pounds, right? It's thousands of pounds. Like you got quarter it and you got to drag it, and it's not just you. You need a team. Don't
right? Put your limitations on me, Jim. I got this.
Oh, okay. I'm sure. I got it.
That would be it. Get a pack of my freaking wild monkey friends, and we'd go up there as, like a troop of freaking chimps, like idiots, and we'd probably screw it up, but like that would be a dream to me, is go backcountry where there's no reception, and go out and set up camp with some really good mates and have some awesome conversation around some campfires, but like just do an epic hunt and bring all that meat home and have 2 years worth of freezer meat. That would be pretty badass.
So shout out Kyle Schmedeke. He's out of my gym, and we were training him. He went to the Navy. He's getting ready to go to Buds. They test him one more time, another physical exam, and he's got a heart murmur.
Oh, brutal.
Right?
Oh, that's heartbreaking for him.
Right? So he doesn't get to go.
Oh, that sucks.
So he's a big hippie and loves fishing.
Right on.
Always loved fishing. So in the summer, he's in Alaska doing salmon fishing or whatever, and then he was guiding one year, and they're out there taking his guys on the guide, and they shoot a moose and they quarter it and they got to drag it out. So I got a guy.
I love it. I've got a couple guys that I have a bear hunt scheduled up there this winter, and that'll be pretty good. I've never shot a moose. I just got back from Hawaii, killing axis deer and training the cops over there. But it's funny. I remember that question on your questionnaire, like, what's an adventure that you hope to do, like a bucket list? And I'll be honest with you. If I died tomorrow, I'd be pretty satisfied with the adventures I've had. But if I lived another 100 years, it wouldn't be enough. And,
right.
you know, like I got 55 or 60 jumps under me doing some epic skydiving. I've scuba dived all over the world. I've hunted 5 continents. I've climbed some serious mountains. I've done my time in the military and got to be an instructor in one of the most amazing billets as a sniper that I could possibly imagine. And then now somehow I've Forrest Gumped my way into a career where I get to travel around the country, sometimes the world, and I get to interface with men that are pursuing their career as a sniper, and I just get to give them more information and help them on their journey. Like, I mean, I don't mean to say like, no, I'm good, I've been there and done that, but I'm pretty content with the idiocracy that I've still breathing after I've done. And like, I've done some pretty epic adventures. It's been pretty remarkable. I've been very, very blessed as I went tumbleweeding through this world, and somehow I'm still on my own 2 feet, which is remarkable.
Awesome. All right. So got a few more. We'll just quickly go through, you're not really into sports. You got a favorite movie?
Yeah. The Outlaw Josie Wales. It's the best documentary ever.
Clint Eastwood.
That's right.
Favorite book?
That one's a tough one. I think I put on there, that's a long list, but probably one of my favorite books would be Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein. Probably one of the best military leadership books I've ever read. The movie was the worst movie ever, but the book is amazing.
I remember components of it.
Yeah.
I don't clarify this, but favorite superhero or villain doesn't have to be fictional.
Yeah, I thought about that. And I put on there Josie Wales, I think. And Wolverine. They're basically the same person. They're like a disgruntled redneck that's freaking kills people for all the right reasons. Like, I'm super into that.
Right. The anti-hero.
Yeah, like kind of the anti-hero that I would say either, if we're looking at like the comic book world, it would either be Wolverine or Punisher. No, Deadpool's like too crass for me. But it would either be Punisher or Wolverine. And then if we're looking at the non-world, I think that, obviously one of my heroes, my biggest heroes, is going to be Christ. And I think he was about the most punk rock dude to ever walk the planet. Just because he never molded. Like, he was the first person to break down racial walls. He was the first dude to break down political walls. He was the first dude to say, I don't give a fuck what your norms are. I'm going to do what the right thing is regardless. And I think it was just super punk rock. If you look at his life, like a special operations dude, he just traveled the world and freaking created assets and helped people be better. That's all he did. It's pretty rad.
Yeah. I don't have the words to describe Jesus Christ.
How do you do that?
He's my guy. Yeah, right. You have a favorite lift?
Deadlift.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. This one's important. You need to be able to answer this one. You had 10 million. What would you do?
And I think I wrote in there, that's sort of the whole point of why I started my own company. I have no desire to be a business owner, to be honest with you. It just is a complete pain in the ass being a business owner. But my goal with that company is, we tithe 10%, we give 10% to charitable giving. My goal with that company is to make enough money to where I can give away 90% and live off 10%. And if I had millions of dollars right now, I would figure out a way for that to be a self-licking ice cream cone and just continue to produce dollar bills so that I could sit there and build orphanages or dig clean water in third world countries. And the biggest thing that my wife and I are pretty passionate about is fighting human trafficking. So there would be a ton of that money would go straight into anti-human trafficking efforts. I'd still train snipers. Like, I'd still hunt my ass off and scuba dive, but that would be my day job.
Yeah.
My day job would be to give that money away in a way that, not like the government where they're spending $200 on a toilet seat. Like, I would take that money and make sure it was spent as efficiently as possible, and just laser beam as much productivity as I could for people that do not have, like your inner city kids. Like, you call me and say, hey dude, we have these kids in need. I'm like, how many pairs of shoes you need? What do you need? Right? How many different students can I pay their way into this summer camp for, and just write a check? And you know what I mean? That's what I would do. If I had $10 million, that's what I would do.
Wow. It's interesting. And it's not a criticism, but I thought you would say something like, I would train all these people so they can figure out their identity and understand that they're okay. I would be like a coach of coaches that went around fixing kids.
That would be part of it. I would get to show up. I would get to pay for all that. I would get
Right.
to show up, speak into their lives, and just love them through their bullshit. Because I mean, what else is there? Honestly, what's legacy? Define legacy. In 3 generations, we don't know our great grandfather's name, but in 3 generations, when my daughter, her son, knows how to treat a woman, and that woman looks at him and says, "How do you know how to treat me so well?" She could say, I guess my grandfather taught me. I don't know. And then,
Right.
How'd your grandfather know? I guess his dad or grandfather taught him. I don't know. Legacy is something that we can pass on. And my name doesn't need to be attached. You said, I'm going to use this now and I'll give you credit. I don't give a shit if you give me credit for the Order of 3, as long as it reaches people's lives and is able to change them. I don't
Right.
care whose the name is attached to it, right? I'll be forgotten about.
Exactly.
I'll be freaking mushroom food here sooner or later. But as long as people are continuing to grow, that's all that matters.
Right. Impact. Creating the best version of themselves. I don't know if you read much Matthew Kelly. He's a big Catholic guy, but his mantra is building the best version of yourselves. He travels the world. I bought one book from him. He sent me 15 other
Oh,
ones
wow.
for free.
That's cool.
Right. And he's always sending me, here's 5 more of the same book, handing out to someone else.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And so I want to build the best version of yourself. And so I'm a big fan of him. Favorite quote?
That one's another long list. I actually have a journal of quotes that I write down, but probably the one that I used to tell my daughter a lot was, you never know how strong you are until strength is your only option. And then I would add to that, so I'm going to remove the other options. And I would remove options, and then she would, blowing her own mind, she would succeed pretty much 100% of the time. And it was like, I've done some stuff where, I drowned once. I've had hypothermia, went down hard twice with hypothermia. I've done some really crazy stuff. And what I found is that so many of those things is because my body was shutting down and my brain was like, nope, you're not done yet. Keep going, because you have to make it across this benchmark. Otherwise, right now you're going to get hypothermia. If you don't make it, you're going to be dead. And so you do that and you don't realize how strong you are until strength is the option. And then you're like, I'm powerful.
Right.
I'm capable. And that's one of my favorite quotes.
Love it. Love it. Any places where we can find you?
Yeah, you can. You're welcome to post my email address for work, which is mbaccellieri@loophole.com. And then my company is True North Raven. You can reach me at info@truenorthraven.com or find me on Instagram, which I don't even have LinkedIn. Instagram for me is something that my wife throws me an elbow every 6 months. She's like, "Hey, dummy, post something. You have a business." And if your best bet is to shoot me an email at info@truenorthraven.com, but you can check out at True North Raven on Instagram, and you might get a post twice a year. I don't know. I hate social media, so I'm not on it.
Gotcha. Well, for those that have questions, again, you can email us info@athlete-builder.com. Again, shout out Pat Ivy
100%.
for hooking us up, and impact right there from that guy. Check out our book. It's available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon, Athlete Builder. Buck, great having you on.
Thank you for having me.
Had a bunch of challenges with the IT, but that happens. We're going to persevere. I love the intricacies and the nuances of being in a container with the mower and the chickens and all the assault rifles. That's cool too. But I learned more, and I'm better. I have more weapons in my tool belt, so I can make an impact. So that's what this episode was about, and that's why we wanted you on, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you guys for having me so much. It's an honor to even get a phone call asking to be a guest on something, and I really appreciate you reaching out.
For sure. Well, until next time, everybody, we'll see you later, and keep at it.